Kia ora, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Business Show, and we're lucky enough to be joined today by a lawyer, essentially. But what I like about Brent from Norling Law is that he's really good around liquidation, which is something that all of us business owners are kind of fearful of and probably don't know as much as we should know about debt collection or debtor management or accounts receivables management. And then, I think really quite sophisticated and complicated negotiating. And what I like about Brent is that, he's not some, how do I say it, with all due respect, some 50-year-old white, old lawyer dude in a suit, in an ivory tower that just doesn't really get small business. I think he takes a really proactive approach to understanding small business and understanding what legal implications and relevant legal strategies might apply to small business. And he's really, really cool at giving out a lot of that content and information for free. So thanks for joining us, Brent.
Good, Jung. Thank you for having me. It's good to be on the show.
Oh, awesome. Probably first question is, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your ethos and why you're so, a lot of lawyers will chase big business, right? And these big 1 year, 2 year kind of contracts or projects, right? Why are you different to them in terms of interested in small business?
Yeah, man. Look, I'm actually real passionate about helping small business owners. I'm a small business owner myself. I have 2 businesses, and I know what it's like, and it's tough, and there's lots of challenges. And when I started Northern Law in 2015, and I think looking at the industry, there's a lot of there's not a lot of access to really good information, and the information that lawyers generally publish is they'll do an article, and it's really conditional, it's really general, and there's always, contact us for some actual advice, and business owners are probably just left with more questions than answers often by getting to the end of the article. So I'm really just about putting out as much information out there as possible. There's a lot of preventative steps that business owners can take to even avoid engaging lawyers, and what I mean is you can prevent so many disputes, and you can prevent so many problems. And so if I can help people to prevent rather than spend all of this money on fixing stuff, then that's a win.
I love that. And part of one of the big reasons why we've got you on the show is because you're going to save us a lot of money, but also time and stress, because you're going to teach us how to, not engage with someone like you.
Well, because the stats in New Zealand are terrible. 63% of businesses that are incorporated do not exist 5 years later. So it's just like the odds are against you from the outset. If you're a business owner, the odds are not good, and a lot of businesses fail. So, if you can get ahead of that, because of the barriers to entry to be a business owner in New Zealand is pretty low. What is it, $150 to incorporate a company or something like that, and you're away. You're a director.
Yeah, 100%. Or if you're one of these startup kids, you're a CEO and co-founder.
Yeah, exactly.
of a multinational tech startup. Super cool, man. Can you talk to me about a little bit about, man? There's so much for our audience. All of you small business owners. Say what's up in the comments if you are tuning in. I know it's a funny time of day, but we've got an opportunity here to, with all due respect, bro, get some free legal advice to avoid us getting in the shit with someone who's experienced, and speaks that language, and happy to help us, right? So, can you tell me, what those stats? What was that percentage? Was it 62% that you said?
63%.
63%. Yeah, I've definitely heard similar numbers. What are some of the reasons that you're aware of where businesses do die? It's about 2.5 years usually that a lot of them drop off, right? That's what I understand. It's around provisional tax and HR and all this kind of stuff. But in your experience, what do you think are some of the key reasons why we go into liquidation or fail before the 5 year mark?
Oh, there's quite a lot of reasons that I see, but there's a few patterns. So what I see a lot of, like heaps of, is what I call the domino effect. So it's they haven't been paid, so they can't pay someone else, and so that's super common, and you see it with construction companies. So like about a year and a half ago, Stanley Construction went into liquidation in Matamata, and it's taken this long, so a year and a half, for me to start having conversations with the subbies that got burnt in that liquidation, right? So you hang on, you do the next job to pay the last job, and then you just keep going and until the IRD starts knocking and says, well, hey, look, you can't keep doing this, and someone issues a statutory demand. But there's always a lag, and that domino effect is a very large reason why I see a lot of companies go into liquidation. And I suppose 2020 was an interesting year. So, in April, I was thinking our insolvency work is going to increase. I knew there'd be a lag, but I knew it would increase. But I was wrong in most of my predictions. So what actually happened, because you had the wage subsidies, you had some interest-free loans, and the real key one was Grant Robinson said to the IRD, just relax, let's pull back on some enforcement and give business owners some breathing space. Because the IRD is the catalyst for most companies speaking to an insolvency lawyer or a liquidator. And they're the ones who generally issue the statutory demand liquidation proceedings and put that pressure on. So when they stopped, so what we saw instantly from that announcement was they started advertising 50% less liquidations every month from April right through to the end of the year, 50%. In this year, so coming to the new year, they
screwed your business, mate.
Yeah. So what actually happened was in January they started catching up. So in January they were about pre-COVID numbers on liquidations, and then since then they are about 20-30% more than pre-COVID numbers. So they're in catch-up mode. And I got told by someone recently, last month they fired out 380 statutory demands last month alone. And so they are going to liquidate, they're doing a clean out. So we can expect this year, just loose numbers, you're going to have all the standard statistics for company failures, and you're going to have about 50% more companies go into liquidation this year than what we have had in previous years, because those companies that should have failed last year that didn't, they're going to go into liquidation this year, and the IRD is going to clean them out if they don't do it themselves. So if you know that, it's quite powerful, because if you know that and you expect it, then you can take steps to make sure that if your client or customer is one of those people that get cleaned out, you can manage your credit, you can manage your terms, and take preventative steps not to be a creditor in a liquidation. And so, there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do to minimize your risk to your customer going into liquidation. Making sure you've got, if you're supplying goods, you've got security. So, if they go into liquidation, just go in there and pick up your stock, because otherwise the liquidator is going to sell it and you're going to get nothing. Personal guarantees, massive. A lot of people are hesitant to get personal guarantees. They think it might kill the deal, but it doesn't. Put them in there. And what I find is most business owners don't even read their terms. They look at the scope of service. What are you going to do for me, and how much?
That's the cost. Yeah.
They just skip through it anyway. So make sure you got a personal guarantee in there. Make sure the terms are signed, and because often when a company goes into liquidation, the director has a house, the director still has something, and so if you can pursue them, then you're more likely to get paid. And probably my number one tip is squeaky wheel gets the oil. So don't just sit there running like an ad hoc collection process where you call them or email them and accept promises or excuses. Make sure you're proactively pursuing it, having conversations, getting commitments, setting deadlines. So, yeah, most businesses don't have a collection or accounts receivable policy. They just follow it up on an ad hoc basis, and that's part of the problem. So it's really getting clear on, this is my process. So at this date, I'm going to do that, and on this date, I'm going to call them or I'm going to email them. And then how long is too long? Is it 60 days? Is it 90 days? At what point do you say, I've done my best and now I need to give it to someone else to give it a crack?
I love that, first, let me say, kia ora ti, kia ora rangi, what's up? If you guys have any questions for our resident small business lawyer expert dude, throw them up in the comments, and we'll grab those when we get a chance. I know T's in business, and a lot of it, especially when you're early stages, kind of around terms and conditions and service agreements and supplier contracts, rah, service contracts. And all that kind of stuff. So throw those up to you if you have those. So you were going to talk about, some of the changes around corporate insolvency. Is that what you were talking about here? The big change from 2020 to 2021?
Yeah. So I'm talking about the number of liquidations that we're going to see this year. Those changes will mean, just swinging back to the domino effect, right? It's a large reason why our clients are in the position that they're in, that they are considering liquidation themselves because they haven't been paid. They haven't managed their accounts receivable process properly. And because they haven't been paid, they can't pay. And so if you can manage that tightly, you're avoiding probably one of the most common reasons I see for our clients going into liquidation.
Beautiful, right? And so, from a business coaching perspective, when we're working with a client, we're saying, "Okay, cool. What's the plan? What are the goals? Okay, we want to, crack $1 million. We want to crack $3 million this year, whatever it is. We want to be pulling out like $100,000-$200,000 personal income. Okay, cool, right? Where's the bottleneck, right? Have you got a sales process? Have you got marketing out the front? Have you got the ability to deliver your product or service with the team and operations and all that kind of stuff?" And they're like, "Yeah, we've got all of that." And I'm like, "Well, where's the problem?" And we call it cash flow. Right? And it's because, you're calling it the domino effect or the accounts receivables effect, where I'm doing work. Obviously, this is generally orientated towards service-based companies, or I guess large amounts of product or high-value product kind of sales. And they're not paying me, so I can't pay my team, myself, my marketers, my salespeople. That is, and so there's that domino effect. Is that something that you will do with a business owner? Is look at their accounts receivables management process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think just getting a process in place is really important. And it's one thing to have the best process in the world and one thing to have the best documents in the world, but then it's actually creating a culture around that where you actually follow it. Because like I've seen people where they have the best robust terms that you could get, but they just don't follow their own terms. So they dictated, here are our terms, and an example will be, I see it all the time in the construction space because we do a lot in the construction industry, and you'll have these terms that say, right, this is the scope, this is the price, and then it says if there's to be any variations, they need to be in writing and agreed. And then people go on site and they start shaking hands. It's like, hey, let's change this to that. Yeah, cool. And this is the price. Yeah, cool. And then off they go. And then when it comes later down the line where you have to actually get paid, that's where all the disputes arise. And then, if it gets to the point where lawyers are involved, the lawyer on the other side is going to go, "Oh, your contract says this must be in writing for the variation to be valid. Where is it? Please give me this email or confirmation in writing." And I'm just sitting there like, wow, they shook hands on it, So it's like, have the terms, and then make sure that you follow them, and don't put artificial stuff in there if it's not how you run your business. Like critically think about it. Yeah.
Okay. Love that. You also wanted to talk about some of the tactical changes to recovering accounts in 2021.
Yeah.
What do you think? And I love that, by the way. one of the biggest problems is people don't execute, right? So they might have a reasonable system. So yeah, what are some of the technical changes, and what are some of the recommendations that you have around actually getting it done? Because remember, I'm a builder, right? I'm worried about meeting with the client, the plans coming in on time, the subbies being in there on time, the boys being on there on time, getting all my materials, all these other things, let alone have I kind of ticked all these paperwork boxes, let's say.
Yeah. So look, I mean, in terms of the tactical changes, number one for me, and I mentioned it before, is squeaky wheel gets the oil, and so
Okay.
it's more important this year than ever to be the squeakiest wheel, because debtors, in my experience, don't owe money just to one creditor. So if your debtor, your client, owes you money, and it's been outstanding for a little while, they probably owe money to other people as well. And if they owe money to you, they almost certainly owe money to the IRD, because the IRD is the lender of last resort. You pay the IRD after you've paid your key suppliers and relationships, right? This is what business owners do. And so your debtors are juggling. Your debtors are juggling all of these priorities and trying to work out, okay, I've got limited amounts of money, how do I apply it? And if you're the one that's the squeaky wheel, you're significantly more likely to get paid. So, what that means is, do have a process in place, do follow it. And if you're on the tools and you don't, I suppose, have time for this stuff, it's about getting help. It's about hiring. It can be in-house or outsourced. I mean, there's so many places you can outsource to now, which is really, really economical. Not sure. Are you familiar with Upworks?
The freelancer platform.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you can go on there, post a job, and whether it's bookkeeping or it's just someone to help you with your accounts receivable. There are people there, getting for an hour or two a week for a small business. It's cheap. Like for most small businesses, you probably only need someone for 1 to 2 hours, just following up and managing it. And so you don't have to do these things yourself. You can
Strongly
get
agree.
help. Yeah.
I love that one. Be the squeaky wheel. Look at security, personal guarantees, and then delegate essentially,
Yeah.
because it's
Absolutely.
20-hour work. 20, it's simply an email or a phone call, right? It's about being
Yeah.
a squeaky wheel. It's not necessarily turning up with big tattoos, big muscles, and a baseball bat.
Absolutely.
It's just about being consistent and talking to Jenny from accounts, or whoever, or Johnny from accounts, whoever it might be, about, hey, when are we going to pay that invoice? You said it was going to be paid yesterday and we haven't received it. Please advise, right?
Yep, absolutely. And it's just someone to have those conversations, so you get commitments on, okay, it's be paid on Friday, or let's be paid on Thursday. And if it's not paid on Thursday, they're calling them on Friday, so hey, it hadn't come through. Is there something wrong on our end? Please confirm. So just feel the pressure.
Beautiful. Hey, that actually takes me to another question, right? So I love preventative stuff, because the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff is just not a good scenario. But please humor me here, because what I think a lot of small business owners watching this is, we're going to have I think for most zero accounts that I see, or P&Ls and things like that, most small business owners are carrying some accounts receivables. But what about a scenario, practically, what can I do when I've got, let's say I roll $1 million a year, so roughly around 83,000 a month kind of thing, but I've got $100,000 in accounts receivables. I'm a service-based business. I might be a web design company. I might be a software development company, maybe a construction-related company. But what can I actually do if I've got that outstanding? What do you recommend?
So assuming bad debt, it's plus 60, 90 days.
Let's
I
say it's
think,
out 60, 90 days. Yeah.
yeah,
And obviously I've
yeah,
stuffed up my process, my preventative process, my good accounts receivables management process, and I've gotten here.
yeah.
What can I do now?
So the first thing is stop work, stop extending more credit, because more often than not, I see people that are have debts this far outstanding, and they're still working. You know, they've still got guys on site. They're still supplying, and that hole is just getting deeper and deeper. And so it's just like, okay, now we have to stop work because, hey, they may be great on paper. They may be great in terms of, getting that 83K per month on paper. But if they're not actually paying, we need to stop. And so that power to be like, hey, we're just pulling the guys off site, or we're not going to supply any further until you clear this, is a really good way to force the issue as well. And then I suppose the next thing is, at some point, and it'll depend on the business at what point this is, but at some point you need someone external. You need someone external to start really ramping it up. And so there's a few different models out there. So for some debts, a debt collector model is useful, and that's just someone who, they effectively operate on a commission. It's usually in the kind of 20 to 25% commission range. And they will just hound them on the phone, emails, text messages. Sometimes they'll turn up, and that has a place. But so there's not upfront fees generally for that. It's just a commission based model, but they can't take it any further than actually phone calls and emails. So if they can't persuade them to pay, there's going to be an endpoint for that. The other thing is, if there's any disputes, so in our experience, there's only two reasons that debtors don't pay. They can't pay or they won't pay. So they can't pay, you're having a conversation around, well, what's reasonable, what can they pay, get them on a payment arrangement kind of situation. If they won't pay, it could be because there's a dispute. Maybe there's like workmanship issues or defects or whatever it is, and a debt collector is never going to be able to work through those issues. And so if it's in that category where you either need a really good negotiator or someone who can work through, say, legal issues, then you're more likely to want to go to a lawyer, and that's a different model again. So it's not a commission; it's you're going to be paying fees up front, and this comes back to why good terms are necessary, because good terms of trade will always allow you the ability to recover your debt collection or legal costs. So if you owe 10 grand, or if you owed 100 grand, then, and it costs you 20% in a debt collector's fee, or it costs you 5 grand in a lawyer's fee, you're adding that on top of the 100 grand. And if you've got terms that allow you to do it, you're not out of pocket for your collection costs. But if you don't have terms, or your terms don't include it, then you're going to get your 100 grand minus your legal fees, and then it's just eating into your margin. So
yeah.
So that's why it comes back to have a contract, make sure it's signed, and make sure it's fit for purpose as well.
When it comes to having a contract, right? So what do you recommend? Whether I'm starting out or, I think you've seen this a lot too, where I've been going for a while and just my, term of service, my service contract is, just not up to scratch, really.
Yeah.
What do you recommend around how do I get a good contract in place?
Yeah. So how you get a good contract in place is you need to speak to a decent lawyer that will actually have a conversation with you about what are the requirements of your business, understand your business, and then make sure your terms reflect that and kind of complement your business, and are not, because I come back to, there's no point in having a good agreement if you're not actually complying with its own terms. So it's about making sure that it's fit for your business. So what I see is most startups won't do that because they don't value it yet. They haven't felt the pain of not having a good agreement yet. So if you put them in a room with a lawyer to say, right, this is what you need and this is the cost, they won't do it. They'll go online, they'll find some other terms, and they'll piece it together, and they'll use it, and then it will take somewhere between 6 months and 2 years for them to experience some pretty hard out pain because they're not getting paid and they realize their terms are shit. And then at that point, not only are they engaging to get their terms sorted, they're engaging to help them collect money on a shit contract, and that's what happens, because when you're in startup mode, you got very little capital. Generally, I mean, just generally, there's not a lot of capital, and a lot of business owners would rather spend it on things that they can see the value in, not lawyers, not accountants, not advice.
No. Yeah, right. Building product and doing sales or marketing.
Yeah. Just get the website done, all of that stuff. Like that's
Instagram.
where they see
Instagram. Got to
value.
get the Instagram.
Yep.
Need some photos. Need to buy a new iPhone 12 to take some nice photos. Hey, I know how long is a piece of string, but if we look at a typical, okay, we'll go construction, right? Just to kind of give us a little bit of a context here. Maybe rolling somewhere between 1 and 2 mil a year, kind of thing. Maybe they've been going a while, maybe a couple of years. What's it going to cost them to get a reasonable, contract in place?
So I mean, for most businesses, it's going to be in the kind of $2,000 to $3,000 mark. For any businesses with kind of niche issues, it might be more. Like maybe like $5,000 is going to be pretty standard.
Dude, that's
most,
really cool.
2 to 3, for most.
Dude, that's crazy, right? And again, I think this is knowledge we don't know, because right, when I am a small business or I'm starting out, it's like, if I call a lawyer, are they going to try and charge me like $100 to call them? And like, I know, hey, this is a question too. What's one thing I've noticed is that lawyers are just starting to charge you to quote you, to sit down with you and do a discovery or a needs analysis or an initial consultation. They're starting to charge you, kind of $500 just to do that. Is that because they're too busy? What's going on there?
Oh, mate, it's insane. So I do the complete opposite.
Wild West, right?
I do the complete opposite, and I always have. I'm going to have the conversation for free, and
right.
we're going to talk about the problems. We're going to talk about the solutions, and I'm not holding them back. Like at the end of our call, you could take my solutions to someone else if you want, and I'm not trying to like guard the solution, but I think it's just a scarcity mindset thing, man. I think it's just the legal industry is so used to charging billable units. They're so used to charging every single 6 minute that they spend, that it's like, hey, I need to do this for the initial conversation too. And so, I'm not a believer in that. So, I mean, I suppose when I started Norling Law at the time, I thought it was a disadvantage to have to like build out all the systems and processes from scratch. But looking back, I can see it's actually probably my biggest advantage, because I have not inherited all the bullshit that most firms have. Like, when it comes to, not just client-facing stuff, but also the team dynamics, things around budgets that create so much toxic politics in firms. I just don't have any of that. I didn't inherit it. So, and I think I suppose, look, change is coming in the legal industry. It's going to take some time, but there's definitely change that needs to happen, because clients want certainty, and like lawyers do have a pretty bad rap for surprising their clients with monthly invoices, and it's just like, oh, it's a bit more than we expected. Here's another bill, and then it does create a reluctance for clients to engage with their lawyers because they're scared of what it will cost. So I think I mean the legal industry needs to get a lot more certain with their charging.
Oh, mate, I'm looking forward to having you back. I'm quite interested in the the business strategy, so to speak, or the the journey of Norling Law as well, because I think that's going to be quite valuable to our viewers and such as well. Just tying off that last point around the contract, right? It costs you $2 or $3 right? And as a business coach, now that I know that, because I wasn't even sure, because they get crazy quotes. They're like, oh, $6,000, or they're like, oh, $600 just to sit down and see what you need, right? And I'm like, dude, I've got this thing that's worked 99% of the time for the last 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is. I think I just need it reviewed. And you want to charge me $600 just to have a look at the thing, right? Let alone the multi-$1,000 invoice that you're going to send me at the end of the process. So 2 or 3 grand to get a reasonable service contract. Let's just say it's kind of quite simple and straightforward kind of thing. I think that's really good when you're rolling, $1 million a year. It's actually quite time. I get startup because you don't have 5 cents, but when you're an established business, take the time to kind of do it, and then. Again, I'm going to plug Gnawling Law here because, obviously you can see, at this point in the conversation, it's about implementation of that too and execution of that too. So it's about, and it's a hand in hand, right? You're saying it's about designing, the contract in line with what you're actually going to do. And then it's about actually doing what you're saying in the contract. And then you get the practical outcome, which is, you can prevent massive accounts receivables, which can eventually kill your business.
Well, it can also, if you do end up in a situation where you need to engage someone to collect, it makes it so much easier for us to come in and collect it because it's clean, which means if it's clean, you're going to spend less. If someone comes in and everything's messy, I'm going to quote them higher. If it's real clean and I can just see a straight line to collection because I don't have to deal with all the bullshit, they're going to get a lower quote.
Okay, I love it. Hey, so that's us for this week. But we're hoping to have you back soon. I actually think, would you be interested in talking about, the journey that Gnawling Law has been on? I think that's going to be super cool too. And it's going to give us insight as small business owners as to, how you've set it up to really, really help us too. So, cool. Is there anything else that you'd like to kind of leave with the audience?
Hey, so I'll be remiss if I didn't say, if anyone does want any help, we do offer a free 30-minute legal consult. So you can book straight into my calendar on our website and we can have a chat, no obligation. So just talk about solutions.
Nice, bruv. Look, I like that. Well done. I was going to plug you, but again, you wouldn't be on the show. He wouldn't be on the show if I didn't rate him as someone that's really worth talking to. And I mean, it's a 30-minute free consultation, no obligation, man. So if you do have some legal questions, and we all do, let's be honest, right? There's just shit we don't know about our business, and we're too scared to talk to a lawyer because they're going to try and charge us just to talk to them. Yeah, cool. And we'll chuck up your details in the comments as well. With a link to the is there a link to the consult?
Yep, I can give you that.
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah. If you can throw that at us, then we'll get that posted as well. Thanks for your time, Brent. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you are watching this as a replay, feel free to throw your questions in here. Brent has very kindly offered his time, and we'll try his best to answer those. And we'll see you back soon.
Cheers, having me.
Cheers, bro.